All right, guys. First instructional video of the week. We will be obviously starting to work with complex numbers this week. Of course, you guys have seen them before. We know that I is the square root of -1, okay, which you've seen before. We usually don't write square root of -1. We usually leave it as I. It's easier to look at. And so when you take a look at problems like this, and we want to simplify these things, and a lot of other problems similar to this, it goes back to the same set of facts that we use. Okay, I to the first is I, no big deal. I squared, well, that would be the square root of -1 times square root of -1, so that's just -1. Okay, I cubed. Well, that would be the square root of 1 times square root of 1 times square root of 1. Okay, so we would get -1 times I, so that gives us -I. And then I to the fourth. Well, I to the fourth would be I squared times I squared, so -1 times -1 is 1. It's this guy right here that really helps us figure these out and simplify. So if the exponent is any multiple of 4, I to that power gives us 1. Okay, so for instance, we have I to the fourth equals 1, and obviously 4 is the first multiple of 4. The second multiple of 4 would be 8, so I to the 8th, that also gives us 1. The third multiple of 4 is 12, so I to the 12th will also give us 1. The fourth multiple of 4 is 16, so I to the 16th will also give us 1, okay, and so on. Okay, it is this which helps you immensely figuring these guys out. Okay, so we start with that first guy, okay, I to the 6th plus I to the 13th. And what I want to do is I want to take both of these individually and split it up so that I express it as I to some multiple of 4, the largest one, times I to whatever I'm left with. Okay, so this guy right here, I ask myself, okay, what's the largest multiple of 4 that's less than 6? And that would be obviously 4. So I can write this I to the 6th. I can write it as I to the 4th times I squared. And of course, the bases are the same I, so I to the 4th times I squared, I'd add the exponents, get I to the 6th. Okay, and then we look at this guy right here and say, okay, what's the largest multiple of 4 that's less than 13? Well, that would be 12. Okay, so I to the 13th is the same as I to the 12th times I to the 1st. Okay, once again, the bases are the same, I times I, so I can add the exponents. 12 plus 1 is 13. Okay. All right, so let's see. I to the 4th, well, anytime you take I and raise it to a power that's a multiple of 4, you always get 1, so that's 1 right there. I squared is -1 plus I to the 12th, again, 12 is a multiple of 4, so I to the 12th is 1, times I to the 1st, which is just I. Okay, so notice what I get. I get -1 from going 1 times -1, plus 1 times I is just I. Okay, and so you could leave it like that, or you could switch it around, or we could write it as I minus 1. Doesn't make any difference. Okay. So that first one simplifies down to I minus 1 or -1 plus I. Okay, we take that second one. Okay, I to the 25th plus 2 times, I'm sorry, that's minus, my fault. That is a minus sign. Minus 2 times I to the 18th. Okay, so let's see. I got to start with this guy. Okay, I need the largest multiple of 4 that's less than 25. That'd be 24. So that's the same as I to the 24th times I to the 1st. Minus 2 times, okay, I to the 18th, so the largest multiple of 4 that's less than 18 is 16. So that would be I to the 16th times I squared. Okay. Well, I to the 24th. Okay, 24 is a multiple of 4, so I to the 24th is the same as I to the 4th, so that's 1. So I have 1 times I to the 1st, that's just I, minus 2 times I to the 16th. 16 is a multiple of 4, so I to the 16th is the same as I to the 4th. So I to the 16th is just 1 times I squared is negative 1. Okay, and then we just simplify. Okay, this is I. Let's see, this would be negative 2 times 1 times negative 1, that's positive 2. So it's just like that. I plus 2, and you know, if you wanted to switch the order and write it as 2 plus I, that's okay too. So either one of those guys is good. Okay. Let's take this third one. Okay, so I have I to the 66th plus, notice that that 5 and the I are all part of the base there, so we have to cube everything in there. So that'd be 5I cubed. Let me move this up a little bit. Okay, so we start with this first one. We say, okay, what's the largest multiple of 4 that's less than 66? That'd be 64. Okay, so that's I to the 64th times I squared. Okay, 64 plus 2 is 66. Good. Okay, let's take a look here. All right, now remember, this would be 5 cubed times I cubed using your exponent rules from like Algebra 1. Okay, so let's see, I to the 64th. 64 is a multiple of 4, so I to the 64th is the same as I to the 4th, so we get 1. So I got 1 times I squared. I squared is negative 1. Negative 1 plus 5 to the 3rd power is 125. And I cubed is negative I. Okay, so it looks like we're going to get negative 1 from right here, and then this would be negative 125I. Okay, so you could write it like that, negative 1 minus 125I, or you could switch the order and you could say negative 125I minus 1. So either one of those is good. Okay, so far so good. All right, let's take this fourth one. Okay, so I have 7I to the 19th plus, once again, notice everything is to the 2nd power, so that's 7I squared. Okay, so let's see, 7 times I to the 18th. The largest multiple of 4 that's less than 19 is 16, so that would be I to the 16th times I cubed. 16 plus 3 is 19, so that's good. Okay, this guy, I've got to go 7 squared times I squared. Okay. All right, so here we go. 7 times I to the 16th. 16th is a multiple of 4, so I to the 16th is the same as I to the 4th. So I get 1. I cubed. Well, I cubed is negative I. Plus 7 squared is 49 times I squared. Well, I squared is negative 1. Okay, so let's see. 7 times 1 times negative I, that's negative 7I. 49 times negative 1 is negative 49. So like that. Or you could switch the order and write it as negative 49 minus 7I. Okay, and we got what we need. And they all come back to these things. Okay, these things are really important. And especially this last one makes life a heck of a lot easier. Okay, so far so good. Let's see what we got going on here. Okay. Just some basic simplification problems. Looks like these top two are real similar. Looks like we just got to multiply a whole bunch of monomials together. And then we look here. Okay, well that's a binomial and that's a binomial, so that's FOIL method. Binomial, binomial, FOIL method. Binomial, binomial, FOIL method. Okay, so we'll start with those and we'll talk a little bit more before we get down here. Okay, so let's see, let's take this first one. Okay, so I have negative 2i times 5i times 3i. So what I'm thinking in my head, I'm thinking, let's regroup this, okay? And let's regroup the coefficients together mentally. So I'm thinking, okay, multiply the coefficients together, negative 2 times 5 times 3. And again, I'd be doing that in my head. Okay, and then I would have I times I times I times I times I. Okay, so let's see, negative 2 times 5 times 3, that'd be negative 30. And I times I times I is I cubed. So we come back here and we say, okay, well, what's I cubed? I cubed is negative I. Okay, so I'm going to get negative 30 times negative I, which gives me a positive 30i. And we got the first one out of the way. Okay, let's take that second one. Very similar to the first one. So again, in my head, I'm going to group these things together. Okay, coefficient is 1, coefficient is 10, coefficient is negative 4, coefficient is negative 1. So I'd have 1 times 10 times negative 4 times negative 1. And then I'm going to get I times I times I times I. I times I times I times I. And again, I do that in my head. It's okay if you write it on paper. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so let's see. Negative times negative is a positive. So it looks like I'm going to get 40. And then notice this is I to the fourth. And remember, I to the fourth, because 4 is a multiple of 4, I to the fourth is 1. Okay, so I get 40 times 1, which obviously is just 40. Okay. Got the first two out of the way. Now 3, 4, and I'm sorry, why is it 3, 4, and 7? I got these mixed up. Okay, the numbers, that's okay. We'll do these guys. Okay, so 3, 4, that should be 5, 6, and change that to a 5. This is to a 6, this is to a 7, this is to an 8, and this is to a 9. I don't know how I got those numbers mixed up. I have no idea. Okay, so 3, 4, and 5. Notice you're multiplying binomials, so FOIL. Okay, so FOIL method. Okay, let's start with number 3. Okay, so I have 1 minus 4i times 3 plus 5i. Okay, so first times first. 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, outside. 1 times 5i, that's 5i. Inside. Negative 4i times 3, that's negative 12i. And then last times last, negative 4i times 5i, that's a negative 20i squared. Okay, then we just simplify. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I get 3. Let's see, 5i minus 12i is negative 7i. Minus 20, I squared, once again, I squared is negative 1. So that's negative 20 times negative 1. So I get 3 minus 7i plus 20. Okay, so your final answer, we could write that as 23 minus 7i or negative 7i plus 23. Either way, doesn't make any difference. Okay, so we're good there. Okay, so that takes care of, let's do 4. Okay, again, FOIL method. Okay, so I get a negative 2 plus 6i and a 3 plus I. Okay, so first times first, negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Outside, negative 2 times I is negative 2i. Inside, 6i times 3 is 18i. And let's go last times last. 6i times I, that is 6i squared. And then we simplify. Okay, so I get a negative 6. Negative 2i plus 18i is 16i. And then let's see, 6 times I squared, well, that'd be 6 times negative 1. Okay, so I get a negative 6 plus 16I minus 6, and then just add the negative 6 and negative 6. So we get a negative 12 plus 16I. Didn't want to do that. Okay, which would be the same as 16I minus 12. So either one of those two guys, like that. Okay, last one, okay, that renumbered number 5. Okay, so let's see, we've got 4 minus 5I and 7 minus 2I. Okay, FOIL method. Let me move this up a little bit. Okay, so let's see, first times first, 4 times 7, 28. Outside, 4 times negative 2I, negative 8I. Inside, negative 5I times 7, negative 35I. And then last, negative 5I times negative 2I would give us a positive 10I squared. And then we simplify. So I got the 28. Let's see, negative 8I minus 35I would give us negative 43I. And let's see, this would be 10 times negative 1, so that's a negative 10. So let's see, adding the 28 and the negative 10, I get 18 minus 43I, or I could write that as negative 43I plus 18. Okay? Either way, and then we're in good shape. Okay? Once again, notice how it's just algebra 1, a lot of algebra, okay, which you expect to see in any higher math, and we're also relying on these 4 facts right here. Okay, so let's see what we got going on here. Okay, renumbered number 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, so for those of you that have had me in the past, notice we're squaring binomials. And of course, we don't use the FOIL method when we square binomials, we use formulas. Okay, so remember, when you square a binomial, okay, you take the first term and square it, a squared. Bring the operational sign over, plus. The middle term is always 2 times the first times the second, so it'd be 2 times a times b, 2ab, plus, always plus, second term squared, b squared. And if I change that operational sign to minus, the only thing it changes is the sign of the middle term. So we take the first term, square it, I get a squared, bring the operational sign over, 2 times the first times the second, so 2 times a times b, 2ab, always plus, second term squared, b squared. So notice the only difference between a binomial with plus being squared and a binomial with minus being squared is a sign of the middle term. That's the only thing that's different. Okay, so I'm going to use those, and I certainly advise you guys to use them as well. Okay, all right, so let's see, we're starting with this guy. Okay, 6 minus 2I squared. So this guy acts as my A, and this entire thing, 2I, acts as my B. So let's see, we take the first guy and square it, and I'd be doing this in my head. Bring the operational sign over, then it'd be 2 times the first term times the second, 2I, plus the second term squared, and you gotta square all of that. And again, I'd be doing this in my head, but it's okay if you write it down. And I'm writing it down so everybody can see. So let's see what happens here. 6 squared is 36. Let's see, minus 2 times 6 times 2 is 24. So that'd be 24I. Plus, let's see, 2 squared is 4. I squared is negative 1. Okay, so I get 36 minus 24I, and this would be negative 4. So one way, I'm going to leave, let's see, I'm going to leave the constants out front. So 36 minus 4 is 32. 32 minus 24I. And again, you can switch the order there if you want. It doesn't make any difference. Okay, so far so good. So let's see what we got going on here. Okay, we got this second guy. Okay, so I'm going to do 3I plus 4 squared. Okay, so this guy, this entire 3i acts as my A, and that 4 acts as my B. Okay, so I take the first term and square it, and you gotta make sure you square everything. 3i squared, bring the operational sign over plus 2 times the first one, which is 3i, times the second one, which is 4, plus the second squared, 4 squared. And again, I'd be doing it in my head. It's okay if you write it down. Write everything down if you want to, okay? Some of you might be really familiar with these, and some of you might not be, so definitely get familiar with them. Okay, so let's see. When I do this guy, 3 squared is 9. I squared is -1. Okay, plus 2 times 3 times 4. Well, that's 24 again, so 24i plus 16. Okay, so I'm going to get a -9 plus 24i plus 16. I'm going to put the term with I first for the heck of it. So let's go 24i, and then -9 plus 16 is 7. And if you want to switch the order there, that's okay. You can switch the 7 and the 24i. That's up to you. Okay, so let's see what we got next. We have 2i minus 3. Ooh, now that is cubed. Ooh. So we got some tougher ones there. That's going to take a little bit more time. Well, I'm thinking about these guys right here. Okay, let me move this out of the way. Okay, so how about this? Well, wouldn't that be the same as 2i minus 3 times 2i minus 3 squared? Okay, so I can use this formula on that, and then I'm going to have to do double distribution. Okay, so let's see. 2i minus 3. Let's see this guy. When I square it, take the first term, square it. So that's 2i squared. Bring the operational sign down. It's going to be 2 times the first, which is 2i, times the second, which is 3, plus the second squared. Okay, so I'm going to have to simplify this and then multiply it all by this. Okay, so I'm just going to bring my 2i minus 3 down. Let's see here. 2 squared is 4. I squared is -1. Okay, minus 2 times 2 times 3. Well, that's 12, so I get 12i. Plus 3 squared is 9. Okay, so I get a 2i minus 3. Let's see, I have the I first here, so I'm going to put the -12i first. And then let's see, this would be -4 plus 9, so that's 5. And notice I have a binomial times a binomial, so that is FOIL. All right, so I got to use the FOIL method to finish this. So let's see, first times first, 2i times -12i, that's a -24i squared. Outside, 2i times 5, that's 10i. Inside, -3 times -12i, that's a positive 36i. And then last, -3 times 5, that's a -15. Okay, let's keep rolling. All right, so notice this is -24 times I squared. I squared is -1. Okay, so that is -24 times -1, so that's positive 24. Let's see, 10i plus 36i, that's 46i. And then my minus 15. And so we just add the 24 and the -15. And let's see, that'll give me, what, 15? No, 24 minus 15, that makes no sense. 9. Okay, so 9 plus 46i. Yeah, we're good. We're good there. Okay, so we're down to the last one. Let's see what I got going on here. Let me pull another piece of paper here. Okay, so let's see, this last one. Okay, this is 4 plus I to the 4th. 4 plus I to the 4th. Okay, well, I want to use those formulas, so I'm thinking, why don't we split this up into 4 plus I squared times 4 plus I squared. Okay. All right, so let's see. I take the first term, square it, so 4 squared, plus, bring the operational sign down, 2 times the first, 4, times the second, I, plus second squared. So that'd be I squared. And obviously I did that, okay, and obviously this is exactly the same. Okay, so I just recopy this. 4 squared plus 2 times 4 times I plus I squared. Okay, so let's see. That's going to be 16 plus, that would be 8I plus I squared is -1. And obviously this thing is the same as this guy. So 16 plus 8I plus -1, like that. Okay, so add the 16 and the -1, okay? And I'm gonna get 15 plus 8I, and obviously this is the exact same thing, okay? 15 plus 8I. Okay, so you could use the FOIL method there if you wanted to, or isn't this just the same as squaring 15 plus 8I? So I'm going to use my formula. You go ahead and use the FOIL method if you want. Okay, 15 plus 8I squared. I'm going to do it that way. Okay, so I'm going to get 15 squared plus 2 times 15 times 8I plus square 8I. You got to make sure you square all of it. Okay, so let's see. 15 squared is 225 plus, let's see, that would be 2 times 15 is 30. 30 times 8 is 240. So that's 240I. If you can't do that in your head, that's what these guys are for. Okay, and let's see, 8 squared is 64. I squared is -1. Okay, so I'm going to get 225 plus 240I minus 64. And then we go 225 minus 64. So let's see, 225 minus 64, and we get 161. Okay, so this is 161 plus 240I. And if you want to switch the order of that, you can switch the order of that. Okay, so we're good. Okay, I like that. And I'm going to shut this video down. That's long enough, and I'll be posting a second one soon.